What is up, guys? It is Styx here, and today I'm going to be going over more of a theorycraft build type video. I have been reading a lot of information about Prismatic, a lot of video watching from the people who got to go and play it to make sure that certain things worked how I thought they did. Some did, some didn't. I'm looking at you, Arcane Needle exotic with a name that is really annoying to pronounce. And so I'm going to give y'all my rundown for a build for the class I'm most excited to see Prismatic on, which is oddly enough the Warlock. Usually I'm most excited for Hunter stuff. I'm usually least excited for Titan stuff. I don't know why, it just doesn't really click with me, as if you couldn't tell from the types of videos I make. But right now I'm really looking at Warlock and thinking that a lot of the aspects and the fragments and stuff like that are really cool with it. So I'm going to give you my rundown for what I'm going to be trying to gun for and to see if it works as soon as the final shape drops, and what I would recommend to others as well. Starting off, we are going to be going with the Mataidoxia Arcane Needle exotic. I don't know how exactly we will be able to get it, if you'll be able to do the good old get it in the Lost Sector instead of through the campaign type thing or what, but what I do know is that I'm going to get that exotic because it works way better than we thought it was. We looked at the trailer, we all thought it was terrible. If you thought it didn't look terrible at that point, then you're going to be even more excited right now, because when you hit something with your Arcane Needle, now when that target dies, it releases a big suspending explosion. What we saw in the trailer was it taking all 3 Arcane Needles to do this. Now, that was because we just saw the footage and interpreted it that way. Instead, that is a secondary effect of when you use several Arcane Needles on the same target, the explosion becomes bigger and so does the suspend. Realistically, I think the best way people are going to be using this is going to be using one Arcane Needle and then finishing off the target with a weapon or with another ability. This is just simply because that brings a lot of synergy with a lot of other effects, such as a lot of the fragments and stuff we're going to be using in this build. Now, I think this will be really nice for just general ad clear and just a little bit of everything, as well as when you are up against those boss enemies and you do want to unleash all of those Arcane Needles, then you'll be that much more impressed by the damage and or CC of this, crowd control of this ability. I'm looking at this especially because Arcane Needle looks to be one of, if not the best, melees for Prismatic Warlocks. It's just a really good melee overall and has 3 charges, which is wild. The best supers I'm going to be looking for here, I don't know if it's maybe my thirst for the newer stuff, but I'm really looking at Needlestorm and Song of Flame positively here, both in different circumstances. If you're going with you need more boss damage or you need to kill high value targets or champions or something, then Needlestorm is going to be your best friend because it does a lot of damage. It's potentially one of the best high damage, like instant supers for Warlocks right now, and I imagine that's not going to change very much when final shape rolls around. But a really good neutral game, and just in general like ad clear and all that, super is going to be Song of Flame. Simply because you're going to be able to spam all of these like unique grenades and like the melee, and you're going to be able to using a ton of your abilities, and you'll have the damage resist, and so it just seems like a really good thing to just pop and use it as you go. And then obviously it will be applying a lot of Scorch with your solar and your kinetic weapons, which I do intend on rolling a solar weapon and potentially a kinetic weapon in this build, so we'll see how that works out when I'm able to actually play with it, because it seems to be extremely potent, at least right now. The aspects I'm looking for are going to be relatively standard and what you might just be expecting from most people right now. Feed the Void gives you Devour, duh, that's amazing, especially great. And then Hellion, which is the new aspect that gives you a little solar buddy that just hangs around, chills out, and shoots explosives at your enemies. Which, you know, that escalated, but it seems extremely useful, really good at applying Scorch. It seems to be able to hit multiple enemies with one shot from the gameplay that I saw, and it seems to be really useful to run, and I genuinely think it's going to be one of the stronger aspects. In addition to that, if each shot of this little solar buddy applies the light transcendence, it'll help balance out the other dark heavy abilities we're going to have on this, so that's useful in and of itself. Now, we're going to be running Empowering Rift. This is because the Devour is going to give us the majority of the healing we need anyway, and we're going to have other ways to proc restoration on ourselves, especially for using Song of Flame. So I'm running Empowering Rift on this. If you want to run Healing Rift, totally fine. I don't see any issues with it. I'm also going to be running either Vortex or Cold Snap grenades. This is mostly because if I run the Vortex grenade, then that gives me more light transcendence, and the suction crowd control is good, plus some nice void damage, just mixing things around. But if I'm running Cold Snap, that'll be to freeze targets, crowd control, that kind of stuff. Maybe if I want to swap to like an Osmiomancy gloves for something a little bit more standard, or using the Osmiomancy class item with some other exotic effect, that will also work extremely well instead of the Mataidoxia or whatever it's called. Now, the fragments I'm thinking of right now, I don't have a lot of information, but I did learn of a new fragment that wasn't listed in their Prismatic deep dive from Dado's play, which he posted just a few days ago, the day of me recording this actually, because I saw that and I thought it was a really good fragment to kind of balance out builds that rely more on one or the other in terms of the way this balance works with Transcendence, because you're basically going to be teeter-tottering on a seesaw, and you don't want to go too far in one direction, you don't want to go too much in light or too much in dark damage, because then you're not going to be getting your Transcendence nearly as quickly as you could, and that is where a lot of your damage comes from. It's basically a mini super. It's a second super. You want it as much as you can, and you get it from dealing damage with both dark and light abilities. So, starting off with fragments, we're going to go with Facet of Hope first. Gives increased rift regen while buffed, which we will always have an elemental buff if you are playing this correctly. We're going to be cycling through Devour, Restoration, Radiant, all of this stuff. You should always have at least one, if not several, beneficial elemental buffs on you. So you will always have an increased rift regen, and then while you're in your rift regen, you can generate more of these buffs. Facet of Purpose to grant restoration while we are using Song of Flame whenever we pick up an orb, or Woven Mail when using Needlestorm. I'm going to say that this fragment is most certainly going to be better if you are running Song of Flame. However, if you do end up deciding, hey, I'm gonna switch out this fragment because I'm using Needlestorm or what have you, I wouldn't blame you at all. We're going to be going with Facet of Balance to gain melee energy from light damage and grenade energy from dark damage. This is going to be pretty helpful, especially if we run a light grenade and a dark melee. We're running Dark Arcane Needle already from Strand, and so if you run something like the light Vortex grenade, you can get sort of a similar idea going on with your armor mods, or even make synergy with them to just have tons of abilities all of the time throughout this whole build, which leads to more Transcendence. Facet of Dawn to generate Radiant on melee hits. We have this on Solar. If you've ever played a Solar character ever in PvE, this is basically a mandatory fragment. Guess what? We're seeing it here. It's basically mandatory here. It's a flat buff to your damage. You can't really say no to that. It's really easy to proc, especially with this, because you're going to be using the Arcane Needle to get your synergy with your exotic, and to get your synergy with this fragment, and to get your synergy with other fragments, because let's say you don't have your Devour up. Well, you hit something with an Arcane Needle, now you're Radiant, you're buffed with an elemental buff, that gives you more rift regen, so on and so forth. So this is going to be extremely useful. Now, heading in even further with the synergy, the next fragment is Facet of Devotion. I didn't know this existed until I saw Dado's gameplay of it. Maybe they said something about it beforehand, but it wasn't in the sheet that they gave you during the Prismatic deep dive. So this new information, to me at least, really helps with this kind of build, because instead of me worrying about dipping too far into the dark subclass stuff, and when you are using this Arcane Needle, it will unravel your targets, which this unraveling is another darkness debuff, which then has that extra synergy with the fragment of the Facet of Devotion. So killing these targets with these Strand debuffs, that procs your Mataidoxia exotic, and it gives you Radiant and all of this stuff. It also gives you extra light Transcendence energy to help balance out that clear imbalance in abilities here. And another thing I will say here, This exotic helps in 2 ways. One, your Arcane Needle itself becomes anti-barrier. It becomes stronger against barrier champions. And the suspend effect leads to stopping unstop. All you need from that point is if you do have some kind of slow that you either get from one of your abilities or just running like a chill clip fusion, then now you can stun every champion type by yourself without any seasonal mods whatsoever. So you can just roll up into whatever content you want. I don't even need to see the seasonal artifact. I can stun every champion I want. So I would say that significantly contributes to the power of this potential build here. And I would say that this is potentially one of the strongest things you can run, or at least one of the most fun, strong things you can run that'll be extremely useful and very potent when the final shape rolls around and we're able to get our hands on that stuff. As far as weapons I'd use in this build, I would use my Slice Hatchling Tusk of the Boar for some nice ad clear. I could use my Harmony auto-loading Mountaintop for some good single target damage and some good old major killing and stuff like that. I could see my Deliverance with Chill Clip and Demolitionist being extremely useful, because the Demolitionist is going to give me more Grenade, which is more Devour, and the Chill Clip is going to help me with stunning those overload champions. And then for the energy slot, I could see something like a Sunshot working, or I'm going to be honest with you, I'm running Red Death. It doesn't matter if it's bad, it's fun, I like the Red Death. I've wanted it ever since they added Crimson in the game, and it was an insult to its name. Crimson is very fun, it's just not Red Death. Shouldn't have replaced it to begin with, should have been released as its own exotic, and it would have been much better in my opinion. Or the heliocentric QSC sidearm, and then in the heavy slot, I'm going to recommend one of a few things, which are the Apex Predator rocket launcher, bait and switch reconstruction on a crafter roll is your best bet. An edge transit with bait and switch envious assassin would be great. Or if you're running double legendary and the other options, a dragon's breath or a Gallarhorn is going to suit you just wonderfully. Now, if that is enough for you to be like, all right, let's run the build, then good. If not, maybe try it out, see if it's something you're going to enjoy. And if not, then so be it. Find something you do enjoy. I think that that's going to be a really fun setup, and I'm really looking forward to see how it goes on in just a few days. Either way, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and peace, gamers.